When we talk about women in history, we tend to prefer to talk about the women who stood out from the crowd. But I think that the women in the crowd also deserve some attention. Hello! The traditional housewife. Can you picture her? A 1950s woman who waits for her husband to come home so that she will be allowed to serve him dinner and hear about his day. Well, she's a housewife of the industrialized world, and they will get a video of their own eventually. Because there's just no way we could clump them together with the housewives of the pre-industrialized world. And today we're going to talk about them. The pre-industrialized life is a life that not many of us actually would be able to handle today. And the basis for it is that everyone is more or less self-sufficient. If there's something in particular that they want to eat, they will have to grow it or breed it, or forage it, or fish, or hunt it. Yeah, you get the picture. There simply are no stores where you can just go and buy things. You have to produce everything yourself. Couldn't they buy anything at all, you ask? Well, of course they could. There were markets and they bought things they couldn't produce themselves, like Indian spices and really fancy textiles and things like that. But that was only if you could afford it, of course. But they had to produce almost everything themselves. In the pre-industrialized world, almost everyone were farmers. There were rich farmers and poor farmers, farmers that owned their land, and farmers in feudal societies. Well, you get the picture. Not everyone had the same opportunities to lead a good life. But nevertheless, they all were farmers, and they all had to produce their own stuff. In this farming life, work was very gender segregated. Everyone learned more or less from birth what was women's work and what was men's work. What was all that work that the women had to do then? We can say that it comes in 3 parts. She had to keep everyone fed, she had to keep everyone clothed, and she had to take care of the animals. And this week we will take a look at the clothing part of it. Women have throughout history produced a lot of clothes. Not only did they have to sew everything that was to be worn, they also had to weave the fabric. And of course, it doesn't stop there. To weave the fabric, they also had to make the thread. And that thread making, or spinning, as it's actually called, and you know that, of course, is a really huge part of the work throughout the year. The preparation of the fibers is different for different materials. Wool and cotton needs to be carded with these kind of thingies. Carders? They need to be carded. And that was about the first thing you learned in fabric making. And that is very convenient, you know, because carding takes a lot of time. And it's really good to be able to put that in the hands of girls so young that they hadn't yet learned how to spin or weave. I myself would gladly let someone else do the carding for me because I think it's boring. And I know there are carding machines nowadays, but it's not in my budget, you know. Other materials then. Mostly it has been flax and hemp. wonderful and really durable materials from which you can make all from really coarse fabrics to ropes and all the way to the finest linen. But it was even more work with them before they could be spun. First of all, of course, you have to grow the plant, flax or hemp. Flax is a smaller plant and it produces little blue flowers, and you can also use the seeds in food, flax seeds oil. You use it with paint and you use it with everything. It's really a usable plant. Hemp is, of course, cannabis. It's the same thing. People didn't realize that you can smoke it, though. I don't think they did. Or maybe they did, but they didn't tell me. I don't know. They used it for fabric making. I've been told that you can do the same procedure with nettles and get good fabrics, but I doubt that you can get as fine fabrics as you can with flax or hemp. After the harvesting of the plants, they have to rot. Yes, rot. And usually they are just left outside for a couple of months and they just rot. They shouldn't rot too much though, because then the fibers get brittle and we don't want that. The fibers are the things we want to use in these plants and they need to stay strong. But everything else we want to get brittle. Once it's sufficiently rotten and brittle, you just have to start pounding it. And of course there are special tools for this, but I don't know the words for that in English. If anyone knows the word for bråk or skekta, please tell me, I want to learn. But after that you should be left with mostly the fibers, but the fibers then need to be combed. And for that you use something that looks a bit like a big hairbrush. Ah, a heckle. I did know the English word for that. That's a heckle, I think. You run the fibers through the heckle until it looks a bit like really fine blonde hair. They are ready to be spun and then to be put up in the loom for weaving. And when it's a fabric, you can sew things from it. I guess that you now get how much work it is just producing your clothes. And when you live this kind of life, you don't throw away a garment just because there might be a little hole in it. You mend your clothes. And when you can't mend them anymore, then you use what's left of them to mend other clothes. You can also take some parts of old fabrics apart and put them back into the loom to make a new weave from them. And when an item really has nothing more to give in the clothing department, it still wouldn't die, because then it can be used, for instance, as mattress filling or as insulation in a new house you're building. Or maybe you can make paper from them. Making paper from wood is quite a new thing, actually. The thing is, when you have to do everything yourself, you have a better understanding for how much work it actually takes to produce just the simplest items, and then they become more valuable to you. And even though I don't think that we should go back to a pre-industrialized world way of life, I think we could learn something from these people. Today it's not the amount of labor the making of your clothes requires that's the issue. It's the amount of natural resources that's needed for the production. And the question is, do you really need that much new clothes? Or could you take your old ones and mend them? Or perhaps redesign them? That, of course, would spare a lot of natural resources. I hope you learned something new today. See you soon, I hope. Bye!